Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, and it is time to attach the remaining fins. Now, we're going to do this in two steps because there's two sets of fins to be adding. First, these ones are ready to go on the bottom part of the rocket, but before I do that, I'm actually going to put the smallest set of fins on, and I've test fit everything here before I got started because I wanted to make sure, first of all, that everything fit before I started putting crazy glue on it. And also, so the fins are supposed to go where they are, but I wanted to make sure that this bit could slide in easily without, getting stuck on anything. So I'm actually this is not attached, obviously. I'm going to leave this in just to make sure that I glue it so that I can actually get that part on and off. All right, so these ones are actually going to be crazy glued rather than epoxied. I'm not entirely sure why, but it doesn't really matter because that's what the instructions say to do. So they are, now I painted all these black first, and I don't know, maybe I should have covered the little bump that's going to go into the rocket body first. Some of these, and the cuts that I made are all not identical too. So this one is the toughest one. It's a little stiff, but it does fit. I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to sand ever so slightly some of the paint off here. So I didn't actually want to paint the bump at all. It just kind of got in the way when I painted these. All right. All the other ones are easy, so I'm just going to take them out. I'm going to do the hard one first just to make sure. So in any event, there, it kind of snaps in place. I really need to be careful with the amount of dust that I'm producing because the fins themselves, I mean, they're dry, but they may not be 100% cured at this point. So, yeah, that's better. All right, so in any event, the fins, they are going to get crazy glue on them. And we don't need much, of course, because crazy glue is potent stuff. Hopefully you can see that. Let's move it up a little bit. So there's nothing inside the tube here. That's hollow. So putting glue right here on the bump is not going to accomplish anything. So I'm going to try putting some on the front and the back and putting a little bit along the side here like so. Crazy glue sets really darn fast. So this has got to be right the first time and it's got to be fast. And there it goes. The only thing I really wanted to be clear of was that it is not like sticking up here, which it isn't. I'm going to have to like dust this off or something because this fin is a little dirty. I might have to actually sometimes, actually it's worth mentioning now, sometimes when I have little deformations like here, I seem to chip the paint a little bit. I break out a Sharpie. This one is a fine tip rather than the typical ones, but you can just kind of draw over any spots that you damaged. This stuff actually covers quite well. So great. Repeat the process. This should be pretty quick, so I'm going to actually do all these at the same time. The other nice thing is I don't really need to worry about alignment, even less so than with your usual through the fin, because this is going to be lined up one way or the other. There we go. And the glue sets so fast, like that was enough. That was enough time. Continuing on, you'll notice too, this is one of those transitions that I painted ahead of time. My goal in this rocket is to get as much of the painting done ahead of assembly because there's a lot of transitions, there are a lot of little places that the paint could be difficult to do. So I am happy to report that this is probably the easiest one. I just painted this whole thing essentially silver, and that worked quite well. Oops. Shoot. Let's try that again. There we go. Yeah, I ended up moving the top part rather than parts that I intended to. All right, so all these, I need to like dust them off because they got a little dusty from my fingerprints or who knows what. This is nice and smooth going in and out. So I'm going to remove that. This just needs to dry, so it can dry over there. I mean, it essentially is dry, more or less, because it doesn't take very much for Crazy Glue to dry. Now, this, by the way, I had primed off camera a bit ago, so I'm going to put it back together. I primed it, so it's not a perfect finish. Ultimately, it's going to be black and silver, and I can still just barely see the lines that I drew. You can probably see a little bit better. Like this one's pretty easy to see. That, of course, is going to get covered up, but I also don't want this. I would like to be able to see where the lines are so I can attach it correctly. But worst case scenario, if I paint it, I'm just going to eyeball because these wood bits should be in line with each other. All right, so this is ready to go paint. So off it goes. Now, and the Crazy Glue I don't need. I actually considered doing the final fin assembly using Crazy Glue as well, but I decided the good people at Estes probably know what they're doing, so I'm going to trust them. Now, this calls for a bit of epoxy, and it calls for a little bit of epoxy. The fins are going to go in like this. I painted this transition. I thought initially that the fin should be like in direct contact with the transition, but it doesn't look like that's, I mean, it's not how it is right now. And it doesn't look like, according to the instructions, that's necessarily supposed to be the case either, because just like I put the fillet down here with my epoxy clay, the instructions call for a fillet here too, but only on the white part. So I'm assuming that there is supposed to be a bit of a gap there. I don't know. Maybe if I were just a stupendous painter, I would make sure that this was attached fully, but I'm not. So I'm going to be okay with that. Now, there is one other little kind of potentially challenging thing that I need to do, and that is this bit, the standoff for the launch lug is supposed to go here. And it is supposed to line up with another launch lug down here. But I don't have any lines for those things. Yeah, which I'm not particularly pleased about, but such is life. Now, the instructions say that I'm supposed to measure down here at the bottom and find a spot that is equidistant between the fins and use that to make a line that I'm going to put both of the launch lugs in line with. Now, I think in reality it doesn't really matter exactly where it is so long as it's like not going to get bumped by the fins themselves. So I'm going to do my best to get this right. And I mean, I could use a measuring tape, like a fabric cloth measuring tape that would conform here, but the epoxy clay fillets actually make that difficult. So looking at this, it looks like from end to end, it's about 1 5/8 inches. Okay, well, we need half of that. So that's a little bit more than 3/4. So it should be about, and I'm just kind of approximating again, it should be about here. I need to do the same thing, but this time I need to do it up here. And it's going to be, I'm removing the fins here because it needs to be between the gaps. And this time, I really wish I did have my measuring tape, but I don't because I don't know where it is. It's somewhere, but not here. So rolling things, it looks like the distance on the tube here is about 1 1/4 inches. Looks like it comes to about here. Yeah, there we go. So 1 1/4, well, 1 1/4 is 5/4. Half of that would be 5/8. So I need the 5/8 point, which would be right here. All right, does that look centered? I mean, it doesn't look that centered, honestly. I think maybe this is definitely one of those measure twice, cut once kind of affairs. It still looks like, to me, that from center to center, it does look like about 1 1/4. Maybe it's a little less than that, though. No, I'm okay with that. But I think my line, my 5/8 mark here might be not quite as accurate as it could be. I mean, it's not far off. Maybe it ought to be a little bit more like here. Well, yeah. I'm not going to attach the actual launch lug in this video because I want the fins to be dry before that happens, but that didn't race well. That's fine. What I think I'm going to do, though, is break out another little bit of technology here. Here's a laser level. I use this for hanging like pictures and things. One nice thing is that I can use it to project a laser line. So my goal here is try to back it up enough so that I can get a laser and make sure that I'm actually connecting the 2 points. They look like it's awfully close anyway. Yep. So we'll say those points are good enough. And I'm not going to deal with, as I said, attaching them right now. The last thing that I'm going to do in this video is deal with epoxying these fins in place. I'm going to go for one glove this time. And yes, I mean, I guess you don't truly need to wear a glove to do this. I'm only going to put one on my left hand because my right hand shouldn't be anywhere near the epoxy. I mean, it will be near my dowel, which will be near the epoxy, but yeah, that's far enough. Okay. So, time to mix up a batch of this stuff. I am going to mix up very little because I only need, well, not much. So I don't really need to waste this. That's probably plenty. And I can always make more if I need it. Yeah. So this is definitely the point where buying this stuff that you mix yourself is the economical choice, because at this point I would have used up, I don't know how many times I've used epoxy at this point, 3, maybe 4. I would have definitely used up all the applicator tips that come in a tube, and the pack that I bought there costs about twice as much as the tube of epoxy that you can buy, and it lasts a whole lot longer. Okay, so I'm going to do my best to get a very thin layer of epoxy on this. I do not want globs, because I think part of my difficulty in getting the fins settled, the back fins, was because the I got kind of gloppiness going on. All right, and it goes, and I'm kind of looking to get the angle bit there lined up where the fin starts to angle away. I want that right at the transition. This is pretty good. I am going to put a fillet on this, but I'm going to use a fillet of glue this time for a couple reasons. One, I don't think it really needs to be as strong as the ones down at the bottom. I mean, I don't want to neglect it either, but I don't think it needs to be as strong. And the other reason is I don't want to use clay on this because of the fact that I already painted down there, and I don't need to clean up epoxy residue. All right. By the way, these are all sitting in where they're supposed to go right now because I wanted to test fit everything and make sure that it fit. I'm going to prop this up so I don't have the remaining fins resting on the ones that are currently wet. I have to say, I don't particularly love working with epoxy. It's stinky. It is annoying to create. It doesn't set particularly quickly. I mean, it's 5-minute epoxy, so it sets in 5 minutes, but it's not like it is. It doesn't start to like tack as well as wood glue before that happens. So, I mean, I don't love this stuff, but it is necessary when you're going to start building things that are of the scope and scale of this particular rocket and of others. By the way, I am putting some epoxy here on the end of, sorry, on the end of this, the part that sticks out, the end of the tab, because this is still through the body construction. There's still the motor mount inside there, which I kind of forgot about until I looked in there. It's like, what is it bumping up against? Well, it's bumping against the very tail end of that motor mount. All right, here we go. And lined up as best I can. Now, there is probably going to be a gap in many, if not all of these, but it is not as extraordinary as the gap in the first fins that I attached. And that's why I'm going to be okay using a glue fillet. The glue is not going to add much structurally, which is fine. Not terribly worried about that. But it'll at least make it look nice. Now I'm going to just stand this up, and just like with the first set of fins, I need to check for alignment. Now this time it's a bit easier because I'm going to just look down the barrel of the rocket, and my goal here is that the fins ought to be in alignment with the front fin up here, ought to be in alignment with, well, that's a problem, ought to be in alignment with the one down at the bottom. So maybe instead of trying to show this to you, which is causing fins to fall out, I'm just going to stand up and I'm going to look downwards here instead. And a bunch of these seem to be very much wanting to go this way, which makes me feel like, I don't know, I'm not entirely sure why that is. This one looks pretty good at least. But they all seem to need a bump to my left for whatever reason. That looks better. Yeah, I don't know what the deal is with this one. This one really doesn't want to go that way. Not sure why. It's not in alignment with the one down there. Okay. And again, I did think about using crazy glue to do this part, but the downside with crazy glue, of course, is that it sets really, really fast. So you don't really get a chance to check alignment. It better be aligned when you have attached it, because if it isn't, it's not going to be. I don't know why this one just is so stubborn about not going the way I want it to. could be like extra epoxy in there that is getting in the way, but I don't think so. No, I bumped that one. All right, I think that's about as good as it's going to get. Um, I'm sorry you can't see anything there because, well, limits of technology, right? It's not going to fit. So, yeah, epoxy needs to dry. Just looking at my gaps, just checking spacing there. This one is off by a little bit. The other ones aren't bad. Nothing that a glue fillet wouldn't fix. So I'm pleased. Hopefully things will dry nicely, but that'll have to wait for the next episode. So in that, gee, I mean, all I really need to do at this point is attach the launch lugs, and then everything should be good for painting. So I probably will paint some of this, like the top part, this part. Yes, this part's probably going to get painted in the intervening time. And then we'll have to work on the fins themselves. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next part.